There is a cartoon that has been running on American television since 1999 that has done something no roast, no tabloid, and no tell-all biography has ever quite managed to pull off. It destroyed celebrity egos on a mass scale, quietly, weekly, in front of 20 million people eating dinner. Not through exposés, not through investigative journalism, not through any of the formal mechanisms that exist to hold famous people accountable. Through jokes. 4-second cutaway gags, recurring cartoon characters built out of real human beings, implied accusations wrapped inside animation so the laughter could absorb what the words were actually saying. Some of those jokes turned out to be pointing at things that were true 12 years before anyone said them out loud in public. Some of them turned a real living actor into a cartoon villain with his full cooperation across 8 separate episodes. Some of them rewrote the opening credits of one of the most beloved television shows in American history to show what they actually meant. Welcome to Red Umbrella. Let us get into it. James Woods, the one who became the villain. Most celebrities get a cutaway gag, maybe 2. A quick joke about something embarrassing they did, a dig at how they look, a one-liner that plays for 3 seconds and disappears. That is the standard Family Guy celebrity experience. You show up, you get roasted, the show moves on and never thinks about you again. James Woods did not get that experience. James Woods got 8 episodes across 11 seasons. He got a fully built-out character arc with a beginning, a middle, and a death scene. He got resurrected after that death scene because the show liked having him around too much to let him stay dead. He got his own recurring trap, lured into a box with candy, stored in a government warehouse, sent back out into the world to cause problems again. He got a high school named after him in the town of Quahog, which the show uses as a background humiliation. A reminder that his name is literally on a building full of teenagers who know everything the show has said about him. No other celebrity in Family Guy history got any of that, not even close. To understand why, you have to go back to where it started. The episode is called Peter's Got Woods, and it aired on September 11th, 2005, Season 4, Episode 11. The setup is almost too simple to produce what it eventually produced. Brian falls for one of Meg's teachers, a woman named Shauna Parks, and suggests they rename James Woods Regional High School after Martin Luther King Jr. to impress her. Peter, jealous that Brian has a new priority in his life, decides to sabotage the plan. His solution is to call in the actual James Woods. Woods shows up to the school board meeting and delivers a moving speech. He graciously agrees to give up the school name. He seems completely reasonable, and because he seems so reasonable, the board decides to keep calling it James Woods Regional High School anyway, reversing the whole plan by being nice about it. Brian is furious. Peter is pleased with himself. And then something unexpected happens. James Woods has nowhere to go. Brian and Peter reconcile, leaving Woods as the spare wheel in a friendship that no longer needs him. He starts following Peter everywhere. He sleeps in the bed with Peter and Lois. He plays fetch with Peter. He ignores Brian completely, treating him like an outdoor dog. The show builds this into a genuine problem that requires a genuine solution. The solution is Reese's Pieces. Peter and Brian figure out that Woods cannot resist following a trail of candy, a reference to the movie E.T., where Reese's Pieces are used to lure the alien. They set a trail, Woods follows it, and they trap him in a wooden crate. The crate gets shipped to a massive government warehouse full of identical crates. The final shot is a direct copy of the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Peter tells the camera that top men are handling it. That should have been the end. 1 episode, 1 joke, done. 3 years later, James Woods came back. Back to the Woods aired on February 17th, 2008, Season 6, Episode 3. Woods has escaped from the crate somehow. Peter loses his wallet at a Barry Manilow concert. Woods finds it, and instead of returning it, he uses what is inside, the driver's license, the social security card, the passport, the title to the house, to legally become Peter Griffin. This is where the episode gets genuinely strange. Joe Swanson, a police officer who has known Peter for years, who attended the same concert that same night, looks at the paperwork James Woods presents and decides that Woods is legally the real Peter Griffin. Peter is thrown out of his own house. His clothes are taken off his back. Brian is tied to a post in the yard like a dog. Woods moves into the Griffin home, sits at the dinner table with Lois and the kids, and starts spending Peter's money. The Visa bill hits $16,000. Peter eventually gets Brian to forge him a new identity, James Woods, and he gets on to Late Night with David Letterman as the actor. What does he announce on live television? A new movie, a comedy comedy about September 11th called September 11th, 2000 Fun. He plays a window washer who just finished cleaning the last window of the World Trade Center. The studio audience goes silent. At home, the real James Woods, watching from the Griffin living room, screams. That single appearance destroys Woods' reputation overnight. Peter has done in 3 minutes of television what no angry mob could. And then, exactly as before, Woods gets lured into a crate with candy and shipped back to the warehouse. Peter notes out loud that they should remember where they sent him this time. By season 9, Family Guy decided that James Woods needed to die. And then there were fewer aired on September 26th, 2010 as the season premiere. It is one of the most critically praised episodes the show has ever made. The setup is a murder mystery. The Griffin family and most of the town of Quahog receive mysterious invitations to a dinner party at a cliffside mansion. The host turns out to be James Woods, who announces that he has become a born-again Christian and wants to apologize to everyone he has wronged. The list of things he has apparently done to the residents of Quahog turns out to be extraordinary. He talked Tom Tucker out of auditioning for the lead role in A Nightmare on Elm Street, destroying Tucker's acting career before it began. He stole Mayor Adam West's Twitter handle. He promised Diane Simmons an introduction to Dan Rather, and instead introduced her to Danny Bonaducci. He ate Seamus's arms and legs while high on acid, which the episode treats as a reason Seamus now has wooden limbs. He stole someone's parking spot. He replaced Herbert's medication with methamphetamine. Before the evening is over, Woods is stabbed in front of the guests during a power outage. He does not survive. His death is treated as canon, confirmed by the show's creative team as a real, permanent story event, not a throwaway gag. The other characters who die in that episode do not come back. James Woods does. In season 10, Tom Tucker, the man and his dream, reveals that Woods survived because Hollywood hospitals have access to a procedure where the life force of a 17-year-old girl gets transferred into a dying celebrity. Woods bursts through a hotel room door, alive and fine, as if no time has passed. He then proceeds to ruin Brian's television pilot by turning it into a CBS sitcom called Class Holes, complete with a chimpanzee sidekick named Mr. Nubbins. What makes all of this worth analyzing is something that gets overlooked in the comedy of it. James Woods consented to every single one of these appearances. He voiced himself. He showed up to recording sessions, read scripts describing himself as someone who eats people's limbs and steals children's medication, and performed those lines. He voiced a version of himself that the show treats as a genuine villain with a body count. He did this 8 separate times. The question of why is genuinely interesting. Woods has a well-documented personality in real life. He is known for being combative, for going after people publicly, for having a high opinion of himself. The Family Guy version of him takes all of that and cranks it into actual criminal behavior. And yet, he kept coming back. Either he found it funny, or he understood that saying no would just make the show right around him and lose the joke. Or, and this is the most unsettling possibility, he saw something of himself in the character and decided to own it rather than fight it. There is also the Rhode Island connection, which the show leans into and which most analysis ignores. Family Guy is set in Quahog, a fictional town based on the actual town of Warwick, Rhode Island. James Woods was born in Warwick. He is a real Rhode Island native, which is why the fictional version of Quahog has a high school named after him. This is not a made-up detail the show invented for a joke. It is rooted in actual geography. The show is essentially saying, this is your town, this is your legacy here, and we are going to do absolutely whatever we want with it. No other celebrity relationship in Family Guy's history has this many layers to it. Every other famous person the show has gone after got jokes. James Woods got a mythology. He got a villain origin story that spans multiple seasons, a death that the show treated with more narrative weight than most of its actual storylines, and a resurrection that exists purely because the writers could not imagine the show without him in it. And the candy trap. Always the candy trap. By the third time the show used the Reese's Pieces bit, it had stopped being a callback and had become something closer to a ritual. The audience knew what was coming. They waited for it. The moment Peter or Brian produced a trail of candy, the episode was effectively over, and everyone knew it. That is not how you write a celebrity cameo. That is how you write a recurring character. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. James Woods may be the most famous example of Family Guy destroying a celebrity ego, but the Woods situation was personal, played out over years, and had his full cooperation. What happens when the show goes after people who have no idea the jokes are coming, no chance to consent, and no way to fight back, because the accusations embedded in the jokes turn out to be true? That is a different kind of destruction entirely. Section 2. The Prophecy. Section: Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, and the Hollywood Open Secret. There is a moment in Season 4 of Family Guy that most people who watched it in 2005 found mildly funny and immediately forgot. Baby Stewie is running naked through a shopping mall. He is sprinting as fast as his tiny legs will carry him, screaming at the top of his lungs. The joke lasts about 4 seconds. What he is screaming is this: "Help! I have escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement." The studio audience laughs. The show moves on. Nobody clips it, nobody analyzes it, nobody writes about it. It is one of hundreds of throwaway gags that Family Guy produces in any given season. A quick hit on a celebrity name attached to a vague implication of something dark, played purely for the shock of the combination. Kevin Spacey was, at the time, one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. Two-time Oscar winner, known for The Usual Suspects, American Beauty, and a string of serious dramatic roles. The joke reads as absurd precisely because the contrast between his reputation and the implication is so wide. That episode, Don't Make Me Over, aired on June 5th, 2005. 12 years later, the clip resurfaced on the internet and was viewed millions of times in a single week. What happened in 2017 was this. Actor Anthony Rapp came forward publicly and stated that Kevin Spacey had made a sexual advance toward him in 1986 when Rapp was 14 years old. Spacey issued a response. More accusations followed from other people. Within weeks, Spacey had been removed from the final season of House of Cards, had his scenes cut from an already completed film, and had his career effectively ended. The clip of Stewie screaming about Spacey's basement started circulating everywhere simultaneously. People were calling it a prediction. People were calling it proof that Family Guy knew something. Seth MacFarlane addressed it directly. He said, "The Kevin Spacey thing is something I had not heard when it was pitched." He was not taking credit for it. He was also not pretending the joke came from nowhere. His explanation was that the writer's room had very open ears, that rumors circulated in Hollywood about a lot of people, and the writers were the kind of people who heard those rumors and occasionally turned them into jokes without being able to prove anything specific. Showrunner Richard Appel added something important, that every episode goes through a legal review before it airs, and a joke either needs some factual basis to stand on, or it needs to be so completely over the top that no reasonable person would take it as a real accusation. He noted, with some discomfort, that in certain cases, both conditions happen to be true at the same time. That is a remarkable thing to say out loud about your own show. What it means is that Family Guy's legal team reviewed a joke about Kevin Spacey keeping a child in his basement, decided it was defensible either because there was some factual basis for it, or because it was too absurd to be taken seriously, and cleared it for broadcast. And then reality caught up to it 12 years later. The Harvey Weinstein situation is different, and in some ways more disturbing, because MacFarlane was not hiding behind ambiguity when it came to Weinstein. He knew. In 2013, MacFarlane was on stage at the Academy Awards with actress Emma Stone, announcing the nominees for Best Supporting Actress. He read the 5 names. Then he said, "Congratulations, you 5 ladies no longer have to pretend to be attracted to Harvey Weinstein." The audience laughed. It was taken as a general industry joke, a dig at an ugly, powerful producer who women were rumored to tolerate for career reasons. Nobody in that room, or watching at home, treated it as the specific accusation it actually was. Weinstein was not confronted. Nothing changed. The moment passed. 4 years later, the New York Times and the New Yorker both published major investigations into Weinstein. Dozens of women came forward with accounts of rape, assault, and harassment spanning decades. Weinstein was arrested. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to prison. And MacFarlane's 2013 Oscar joke resurfaced alongside the Stewie clip as evidence that people in Hollywood had known or strongly suspected what Weinstein was doing for a very long time. MacFarlane, unlike with the Spacey situation, did not claim ignorance about Weinstein. He explained later that a close friend of his had a deeply troubling encounter with Weinstein and that he despised the man for personal, direct reasons. The Oscars joke was not a rumor converted into comedy. It was anger converted into the only form he apparently felt safe expressing it in. A joke at a ceremony where Weinstein himself was likely in the audience, surrounded by the industry infrastructure that had protected him for years. This is the thing that both situations point toward, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. Family Guy is known as a show that goes after celebrities for sport. The James Woods episodes are about creative revenge. The Tom Cruise jokes are about height and Scientology. The Bill Cosby material is about a disgraced legacy. Most of the celebrity content in Family Guy is fundamentally entertainment. It is the show picking targets it finds funny and dismantling them. The Spacey and Weinstein material is something else entirely. These were not jokes about eccentricities or public controversies. These were jokes, however briefly and obliquely framed, about real crimes being committed against real people, crimes that the industry around those people had collectively decided not to name out loud. Family Guy named them in its own sideways manner, because jokes are the one place in public life where you can say something true and have the laughter act as a shield. Nobody can sue you for a joke. Nobody can force you to prove it. You say it, people laugh or they don't, and the conversation moves on. Until it doesn't. In 2018, the show went much further. The episode HTTP-ET, Season 16, Episode 18, aired on May 6th. Peter is watching television at the Drunken Clam with Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe when a cutaway takes the audience into a room that the show calls a sexual abuser meeting. Inside that room are Bill Cosby, Kevin Spacey, Roman Polanski, Woody Allen, Steven Seagal, Matt Lauer, Brett Ratner, James Toback, and Harvey Weinstein. They are gathered together as a group. The joke is that they all know each other. When someone asks if they know a particular person, Cosby responds that while that person is not there, he is very aware of what is going on. The scene is not subtle. It is not a quick throwaway gag. It is a deliberate roll call of men the culture had by that point publicly identified as predators, placed together in a single room as if they all belonged to the same organization. The show was not making a new accusation at this point. It was looking at what had become public knowledge in 2017 and 2018 and making the statement that these men were part of the same pattern, not isolated bad actors. Fox, the network that airs Family Guy, apparently decided this was acceptable content and let it broadcast. The Emmy consideration materials that year leaned into the show's track record directly. The mailer that went out to Emmy voters that summer had Peter standing in front of the Hollywood sign with text that read, "We predicted Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein. Open DVD to see who's next." When voters opened the DVD case, they found a mirror inside. The implication being that the next person was whoever was looking at it. That is not a joke about a celebrity's ego. That is a show claiming, in writing, that it has been functioning as a warning system about powerful men in an industry that protects them. And the claim had enough factual support behind it that nobody in the industry challenged it publicly. There is a detail in all of this that makes the Spacey situation specifically uncomfortable to think about. The Don't Make Me Over episode aired in 2005. The joke was reviewed by a legal team. It made it to broadcast. 12 years of Spacey's career followed. Projects he was attached to, awards he received, interviews he gave, younger actors who worked with him. And the entire time, a joke on a cartoon show was sitting in the archives with his name on it and a 4-second implication that something was wrong. MacFarlane said the writers always had open ears. What he meant is that Hollywood runs on rumors, and that the writers of Family Guy moved in circles where those rumors reached them. The rumors were not proof of anything. They could not be published in a newspaper. They could not be used in court. But they could be put in the mouth of a cartoon baby running through an animated shopping mall, attributed to the absurdity of animation rather than to a real allegation, and sent out on national television to 17 million viewers who would laugh and change the channel. And then, more than a decade later, the rumor turned out to have been pointing at something real. What separates this section from everything else the show has done to celebrities is that the other targets, Woods, Cruz, Kanye, OJ, were embarrassed, mocked, diminished. The ego destruction was the point and the end point. The Spacey and Weinstein material was embarrassing in a completely different register. It was the show accidentally, or not so accidentally, leaving a paper trail on crimes that the powerful men committing them had managed to keep out of every other public record for years. Family Guy has destroyed a lot of celebrity egos over its run. This section of that history is the one where the destruction turned out to be the least of it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Bill Cosby, though, is a case that deserves its own examination. Because with Cosby, the show spent years treating him as a lovable fixture of American culture, and then had to decide what to do when everything it thought it knew about him turned out to be wrong. Section 3. Bill Cosby, from comic legend to retconned villain. There is a specific kind of discomfort that comes from watching old television and realizing that something everyone found completely normal at the time now reads as a warning sign nobody caught. Family Guy's Bill Cosby material is that discomfort in its purest form. The show's relationship with Cosby spans roughly 2 decades and splits almost perfectly down the middle. Before 2014, Cosby appears in Family Guy as a beloved American institution, a man so famous and so culturally embedded that joking about him means joking about his comedy style, his sweaters, his gibberish-talking persona from The Cosby Show, the particular faces he made when delivering a punchline. The jokes are affectionate in the way that parody of a legend tends to be affectionate. They assume the audience loves the person being referenced. They trade on warmth. After 2014, something flips completely. The same character, the same name, the same face, but now every joke is about rape. Every appearance treats him as a predator. The show essentially goes back through its own history with Cosby in it, reconsiders what it was looking at, and decides that everything needs to be reread from the beginning. Start at the beginning. Cosby's first appearance in Family Guy is in Peter Peter Caviar Eater, Season 1, Episode 2. This is the second episode the show ever aired. The Cutaway is a Cosby Show parody. Theo Huxtable, Cosby's TV son, comes to Cliff Huxtable with a serious problem. He has gotten a girl pregnant. This is a genuinely troubling situation for a teenager. Cosby's response, as the show renders it, is to make increasingly silly faces directly into the camera until his head pops off. The joke is about his comedy style. The idea that Cosby the performer was so committed to physical mugging and nonsense sounds that he could not engage with anything serious, even his own fictional son's crisis. That is the entire joke. His face does funny things. His head comes off. the scene ends. Nobody watching in 1999 read anything into that. Why would they? It was a joke about a comedian being funny in the way that comedian was known for being funny. The next major Cosby appearance comes in Brian Does Hollywood, Season 3, Episode 2. Stewie appears on Kids Say the Darndest Things, the real Bill Cosby hosted television show where children said unexpected and amusing things while Cosby reacted. Stewie's plan is to use his hypnotic glasses to control the minds of the entire American viewing audience through the broadcast. When Stewie gets on stage, Cosby is sitting there asking children silly questions and making the audience laugh. Stewie finds this unbearable. He skips ahead to the mind control. Cosby takes the glasses. He puts them on and pretends to go skiing while the audience laughs at him. When Stewie tries to get them back, Cosby uses the glasses on Stewie, making him say that he likes jump rope, that he enjoys sitting there, that he likes a movie called Ghost Dad, and finally, making him go to sleep. Go to sleep. A real person using a prop to make someone go to sleep, against their will, on a children's television program, in a scene played entirely for comedy. When this episode aired in 2001, it landed as a joke about Cosby being a goofy TV host who accidentally beat Stewie at his own game. The TV tropes page for this episode now has a section called Harsher in Hindsight. The specific language used describes the scene as downright chilling after Cosby's convictions. The part where Cosby says, "Now you are just going to sit here and enjoy it," is singled out as particularly difficult to watch, knowing what came later. None of this was intentional. The writers were not encoding a hidden message about Cosby. They were writing a joke about a famous television host using a well-known hosting format in an absurd context. But the joke they wrote, by complete accident, mirrors the actual behavior Cosby would eventually be convicted for in ways that are deeply uncomfortable to sit with. This is the phase of the Cosby material that makes the show's history with him genuinely complicated rather than simply embarrassing. Family Guy was not calling out Cosby in these early years. It was celebrating a version of him, a lovable, bumbling, noise-making TV dad that was being maintained as a public image while something completely different was happening behind it. Then 2014 arrived. In late 2014, a large number of women began publicly coming forward with accounts of Bill Cosby drugging and assaulting them. The number grew. Then it grew more. By the time the full scope of what had happened became clear, more than 50 women had come forward. Cosby's television legacy, The Cosby Show, Fat Albert, Kids Say the Darndest Things, decades of stand-up comedy, began to be reconsidered by every platform that had been broadcasting it. Family Guy reconsidered it too, loudly. The pivot happens in Peter's Sister, Season 14, Episode 6, which aired on November 15th, 2015. The Griffin family is gathered for a Thanksgiving-adjacent episode. They sit down to watch a rerun of The Cosby Show. The television announcer says, "We now return to The Cosby Show, knowing what we know now." What follows is a parody of the show's famous opening credits sequence, which in real life featured the cast members dancing together to an upbeat jazz theme while their names appeared on screen. The show had run this opening for 8 seasons. It was one of the most recognizable credit sequences in television history. Warm, family-friendly, a signal that what you were about to watch was safe and wholesome. Family Guy's version of those credits shows the female cast members slumped unconscious in their chairs while Cosby dances around them. Guest star B. Arthur stumbles into frame with no pants on. The NBC Peacock, the logo of the network that aired The Cosby Show for 8 years, falls over in front of Cosby holding a drink in its hand. The peacock is clearly meant to represent the network itself, which had hosted the show throughout the years the alleged crimes were occurring. Seth MacFarlane drew one specific line in this sequence. The character of Rudy Huxtable, the youngest child in The Cosby Show, played by Keisha Knight Pulliam, who had been a child during filming, was not included in the reimagined credits. MacFarlane reportedly made the deliberate decision not to use her in the joke. Every other cast member and guest star appeared in unconscious form. The youngest one, the child, was left out. That is a meaningful choice. It shows that someone in the writer's room was thinking specifically about where the joke should and should not go, even within a segment that had already committed to being extremely dark. Peter watches this updated version of the credits and says he did not notice any of this going on back in the 80s. The line is the joke and the point at the same time. Neither did anyone else, apparently. The show did not stop there. In Run, Chris, Run, Season 14, Episode 12, Cleveland and Jerome visit a mural about Black achievement at a local high school. The mural features notable Black figures in American history. Bill Cosby's face has been covered over with a manila folder. The folder has been taped directly onto the mural. Someone has literally covered his face with office supplies. The joke is about how institutions scramble to deal with figures they previously celebrated when those figures turn out to be something else. The manila folder is the perfect detail, not a careful repaint, not a thoughtful replacement, just a folder, taped on, done in a hurry by people who could not afford to think about it too long. In Chris Has Got a Date, Season 15, Episode 5, Stewie recreates the movie The Princess Bride using Bill Cosby. This one does not make the larger cultural argument. It is just Cosby, in a new context, being used as a figure the show can now deploy for pure dark comedy without any of the earlier affection. In Carter and Trisha, Carter Pewterschmidt explains the existence of a drug that makes people simultaneously defecate, vomit, and experience other physical reactions. He attributes its invention to Cosby. The drug exists, in the logic of the joke, because Cosby needed it. What the show was doing across all of these later appearances is something that television rarely does openly. It was going back over its own history with a person and publicly changing its verdict. Family Guy had spent years building up a version of Bill Cosby. Silly, harmless, a comedy institution worth referencing affectionately, and then dismantled that version piece by piece and replaced it with something completely different. The new version did not erase the old appearances. They are still in the show, but the new material surrounds them and reframes them so that watching the early Cosby cutaways now carries a weight they were never meant to carry. Most shows do not do this. Most shows quietly retire references to people who turn out to be something other than what they appeared and hope audiences forget. Family Guy did the opposite. It doubled down, made the accusations part of the comedy, and in doing so created a strange and uncomfortable record of how public perception of a famous person can reverse completely within a few years. There is something worth noting about the timing of the Cosby material in the context of what the previous section covered. The Kevin Spacey basement joke predated that accusation by 12 years. The Weinstein Oscar joke was a knowing call-out of something MacFarlane had personal information about. The Cosby early material was neither of those things. It was genuinely innocent parody, with no apparent awareness of what was underneath the persona being parodied, which makes it the most unsettling category of the three. Not a rumor converted into a joke. Not a known secret expressed sideways. Just a show making fun of a beloved comedian in completely good faith, writing scenes that accidentally rhymed with crimes the audience would not learn about for another decade. The two situations that came before, Spacey and Weinstein, raised questions about what the show knew and when. The Cosby situation raises a different and harder question. What does it mean when you were making the joke for completely innocent reasons and it turns out to have been more accurate than you ever intended? Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Tom Cruise never presented that kind of problem. The Family Guy writers knew exactly what they were doing with Cruise, and they did it with a level of creative commitment that turned him into something the show had never quite tried before. Section 4. Tom Cruise. Height, Scientology, and Tiny Tom. Most celebrities in Family Guy exist in one dimension. The show picks one thing about them, one scandal, one physical feature, one well-known quirk, and it fires at that one thing every time the name comes up. Jay Leno has a big chin. John Travolta is closeted. Kanye says strange things. One target, one angle, repeat until the audience stops needing the setup explained. Tom Cruise is the exception. Family Guy attacks Tom Cruise from 3 completely separate directions simultaneously, and has been doing so across multiple seasons without any of the 3 angles getting old or canceling the others out. The first is his height. The second is Scientology. The third is the question the show never quite states directly, but returns to constantly, the same way the Travolta jokes return to the same implication without ever fully landing on it. The show circles all 3 of these things across years of episodes, cutaway gags, and eventually a fully developed recurring character who exists for no other purpose than to deliver all 3 angles at once. Start with what the show built before Tiny Tom Cruise existed. The early Cruise material is quick and surgical. In Meet the Quagmires, Season 5, Episode 18, there is a cutaway about why Tom Cruise runs in every single one of his movies. The joke does not explain what he is running from. It does not need to. The audience fills in the blank. The implication is sitting right there and the show just points at it and moves on. In Lois Kills Stewie, Season 6, Episode 5, there is a scene involving Katie Holmes. Holmes was married to Cruise from 2006 to 2012. The Family Guy version of this marriage involves an ankle bracelet on Holmes that, when deactivated, allows her to escape. She runs. She finds a cage full of skimpily dressed men and frees them. The scene plays as a hostage rescue. The men in the cage are grateful. Holmes is portrayed as someone who has been released from a situation she needed to be released from. This aired in 2007, 5 years before the actual divorce. Holmes filed for divorce in 2012, and the settlement was reportedly reached within 11 days, which many observers found unusual given the complexity of the assets involved. The Family Guy version of the marriage had already decided it was a prison years before any of that happened. In Fresh Air, Season 12, Episode 13, Chris Griffin is watching what the show calls the director's cut of Mission Impossible 5. The director's cut differs from the theatrical version in one specific way. The step stools that Tom Cruise used during filming to appear the same height as his co-stars have been left in the shot. The camera pulls back to show Cruise performing an intense, dramatic scene while visibly standing on a small stool. The joke is not that Cruise uses step stools. That is a standard Hollywood practice for shorter actors. The joke is that the show wants the audience to picture him using them constantly, for everything, throughout an entire production. These are the appetizers. The main course is Tiny Tom Cruise. Tiny Tom Cruise debuts in Papa Has a Rollin' Son, Season 14, Episode 1, which aired on October 4th, 2015. The episode's main story involves Joe Swanson and his father. The subplot belongs entirely to Stewie. Dr. Hartman tells Stewie that based on his current growth rate, he will only reach a height of 5 feet and 1 inch as an adult. Stewie does not take this well. Brian takes him to the mall to cheer him up. While they are there, Stewie reaches for a shirt on a rack. Someone else reaches for the same shirt at the same moment. Stewie looks up. It is Tom Cruise. They are exactly the same height. Cruise invites Stewie to spend the day with him. His pitch is that being short is entirely a choice, that the middle of the word short contains the word or, which gives you an option, and that option is to decide you are not short. Stewie points out that the middle of short is technically pronounced like the word whore rather than the word or. Cruise sighs and continues anyway. He tells Stewie there is an entire world waiting for people who choose not to be short. They spend the day together. Then Dr. Hartman calls back. He misread the chart. Stewie will be completely normal height. The problem is solved, and Stewie no longer needs Tiny Tom Cruise. When Stewie tries to end the friendship, Cruise does not accept it. He becomes a stalker. He shows up at Stewie's daycare during playtime and frightens him. Stewie runs home and tells Brian, who does not believe him. The show lingers on the specific dynamic of a person who formed an attachment, was cut off, and then responded by refusing to leave. A pattern the show clearly found funny in the context of who it was attaching to Tom Cruise specifically. Stewie and Brian set a trap in the park. They lure Tiny Tom Cruise into a cardboard box. Yes, another box, another trap. echoing the James Woods crate in a way that feels either intentional or deeply coincidental, and ship him to Zappos, an online shoe retailer. The Zappos clerk greets Cruise on arrival and notes that this is not the first time he has been sent back. Tiny Tom Cruise was sent back before, by someone else. This detail is delivered as a throwaway line, and the show does not explain it. It does not need to. Tiny Tom Cruise returns in Big Trouble in Little Quahog, Season 16, Episode 11, which aired on November 19, 2017. Stewie has invented a shrinking machine. He and Brian accidentally miniaturize themselves. Their house is then fumigated, trapping them inside while tiny. Who rescues them? Tiny Tom Cruise appears from nowhere, navigates the miniaturized environment, and gets them out. He is genuinely helpful. He saves their lives. And then, having saved their lives, he asks for something in return. He wants Stewie and Brian to make a sizable donation to the Church of Spaceship Beep Boop. Brian starts to correct the name. He begins to say the words, Church of Cyan, and Tiny Tom Cruise interrupts him. He confirms, yes, that one. The one involving, as he describes it, kidnapping, torture, and extortion. Stewie notes with relief that they will not get in trouble because they did not use the actual name. The final shot cuts to the exterior of an office building labeled Church of Spaceship Beep Boop, where a representative inside says, "What did he just say? We are about love and spaceships and beep boop." The joke is not subtle. It is also not legally actionable, which is presumably why it exists in exactly this form. The show wants to call Scientology a criminal organization involved in kidnapping, torture, and extortion. It cannot do that directly without facing serious consequences, so it invents a fictional church with a ridiculous name, assigns it to a fictional version of Tom Cruise, and has that fictional version describe it in the most damning terms possible, before immediately clarifying that the name is different. This is Family Guy at its most calculated. The joke requires the audience to make the connection themselves. The show provides every component necessary for that connection, and then technically distances itself from having made the accusation directly. Earlier in the same episode, also involving Tiny Tom Cruise, there is a scene where he is stuck under a helicopter belonging to someone named George Townsend. Tiny Tom explains that he was doing one of his own stunts by hanging onto the landing gear. He extracts himself from under the helicopter. He then tries to get Stewie to take a personality test. Stewie declines. The personality test detail is a specific reference to Scientology's well-documented practice of offering personality tests as a way to recruit new members. The episode Papa Has a Rollin' Son also contains a single line directed at Cruise's 3 marriages. When Tom says to Stewie, "You are making a big mistake," Stewie responds, "Yeah, except for all 3 of your wives." The line is delivered quickly and the scene moves on, but it is sitting there in what is otherwise a fairly gentle episode about short people bonding over their height. Even in the episodes where Tiny Tom Cruise is being played more warmly, the show cannot resist dropping in a line that reminds the audience of every other angle it has on him. Now here is the part that stands outside the fiction of the show entirely. In 2014, Seth MacFarlane appeared on The Graham Norton Show to promote the film A Million Ways to Die in the West. The other guests on the sofa that night included Charlize Theron, Emily Blunt, and Tom Cruise. Cruise was there promoting Edge of Tomorrow, which he had made with Blunt. Graham Norton, the host, brought up Family Guy. He specifically referenced the show's mockery of Cruise. MacFarlane was sitting directly next to Cruise. The cameras were on both of them. Cruise did not confront MacFarlane. He did not express anger. He did not say anything that suggested he had a problem with how the show had treated him. The moment passed without confrontation. Tom Cruise is famous for being protective of his image. He has a documented history of responding aggressively when he feels disrespected. The 2005 incident, where he lost his temper on a red carpet when a reporter used a fake microphone to spray water in his face, is one example. He is not known for absorbing mockery quietly. And yet, in a television studio, sitting next to the man who invented Tiny Tom Cruise, the Church of Spaceship Beep Boop, the ankle bracelet on Katie Holmes, and the director's cut with the step stools, Tom Cruise said nothing. What that silence means is genuinely open to interpretation. Maybe he picked his battles. Maybe the audience for that show was not one he wanted to have a conflict on. Maybe he understood that reacting would give the mockery more attention than ignoring it. Or maybe, and this is the reading that the show's years of material almost seems designed to produce, there are things in the crew's jokes close enough to something true that a public confrontation was the last thing he wanted. The show never settled on one answer. It just kept adding episodes. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. OJ Simpson, though, is a completely different case, because Family Guy did not just mock him from a safe distance. The show put him inside Quahog, let him interact with the Griffin family, gave him a redemption arc, and then tore the whole thing down in the final 30 seconds. Section 5. OJ Simpson, the joke that kept paying out. Most celebrities that Family Guy goes after are still standing when the joke lands. Their career is intact, their public image is dented but functional, and the show's mockery exists as one data point in a larger story that is not finished being written yet. The joke lands in real time against a living target who can respond, ignore it, or sue somebody. OJ Simpson is a different situation in almost every way that matters. The show's relationship with Simpson spans the entire run of Family Guy, from throwaway background jokes in the early seasons, all the way through a full episode built around him. And the material keeps shifting in meaning as Simpson's own story keeps developing outside the show. A joke written in 1 year reads completely differently 3 years later, because Simpson himself keeps generating new chapters. Family Guy did not have to update the Cosby material to keep it current. It just had to air what it already had and let reality catch up. With Simpson, reality was already running alongside the jokes the entire time, changing what they meant as it went. Start with the early material, before the show committed to a full episode. In Love Thy Trophy, Season 2, Episode 5, the Quahog 5 News runs a brief segment reporting that evidence has been found to prove beyond any doubt that OJ Simpson was completely innocent. No further details are given. The segment ends immediately. The joke is that the news delivers this information with the same casual energy it uses for traffic updates, and then moves on as if it said nothing remarkable. In Peter Griffin Husband Father Brother, Season 3, Episode 14, there is a cutaway where a drunk Stewie confesses that he was personally responsible for the Simpson murders. His version of events is that he planted suspicions in Simpson's mind about Nicole Brown cheating on him, which pushed Simpson toward violence. The show is playing Stewie's murderous instincts for comedy, as it frequently does in early seasons, and the Simpson connection is the vehicle. The joke requires the audience to already believe Simpson did it, which the show takes completely for granted. In No Meals on Wheels, Season 5, Episode 14, Brian is living with a black roommate. The two of them are watching television when the OJ Simpson acquittal verdict is announced. Brian's reaction is disbelief and fury. His roommate's reaction is joy and celebration. Within seconds, they are both pointing guns at each other across the room. Brian suggests they probably need new roommates. The joke is about how the Simpson verdict split the country along racial lines in 1995, a divide so deep and so immediate that it ended friendships and broke apart rooms full of people who had been getting along fine 30 seconds earlier. In Long John Peter, Season 6, Episode 10, the show delivers what might be its single most economical Simpson joke. Peter Griffin emerges from the front door of the Brown Simpson home. He is covered in blood. He is wearing one glove. He is carrying a bloody knife. He looks like a man who has just done something terrible. OJ Simpson arrives at the same moment, walks past Peter without comment, and goes inside. The apparent intention, the show tells us, is for Simpson to play a game of Boggle. From inside the house, Simpson is heard making a terrible discovery. He starts speculating about what happened and what is going to happen next. The joke is about 15 seconds long. It requires zero explanation. The audience knows exactly what is being implied about who actually killed whom, and the show delivers the implication with complete confidence and moves immediately to the next scene. These smaller jokes are all building towards something. In Season 7, the show gave Simpson an entire episode. The Juice is Loose aired on March 15, 2009, Season 7, Episode 9. The episode opens with a title card explaining that this is one of several recently discovered lost episodes found in the Griffin family basement, and that the events take place in March 2007, which places the story several months before Simpson's September 2007 arrest in Las Vegas for armed robbery and kidnapping. The framing device is the show protecting itself legally and creatively. By setting the story in the past, before the arrest, it can treat Simpson as a man who has only been acquitted of murder, rather than subsequently convicted of unrelated crimes. Peter finds a raffle ticket from 1989. The prize is a celebrity golf outing. He cashes it in and discovers his celebrity is OJ Simpson. The episode takes the position that Peter has somehow missed the most publicized murder trial in American history, that he is the one person in the United States who went through 1995 without absorbing any information about the case. His friends immediately try to correct this. Joe hooks Peter up with a wire to wear during the golf game, with the plan being to get Simpson to confess on tape. The wire shorts out on the golf course. Simpson realizes what is happening. He is devastated. Not angry, but genuinely sad that he has lost another chance at having someone believe in his innocence. Peter, watching this reaction, decides that Simpson is being sincere. He tears off the wire. He tells Simpson he believes him. He invites him home. The Griffin family is not pleased about this. Lois is uncomfortable. The kids are uneasy. Brian is directly opposed and tries repeatedly to make Peter understand what he has done. Stewie, in a choice that says something specific about how the show uses Stewie as a filter for dark comedy, is the one family member who seems completely fine with the situation. Peter decides the solution is a house party. He will introduce Simpson to the whole neighborhood, let everyone get to know him personally, and dissolve the hostility through direct contact. Instead of a party, he gets a mob. Mayor Adam West leads the residents of Quahog to Peter's front door, intent on driving Simpson out of town. What follows is the episode's most unexpected moment. Simpson steps outside to face the mob. He gives a speech. The speech is not defensive, and it is not aggressive. He stands in front of a crowd that despises him and says, simply, that he is not a perfect man. That nobody in that crowd is perfect either. That he has made mistakes, and he has lived with them. That he is asking for the same grace that everyone in that mob would want extended to themselves if their worst moments were the only thing the world remembered about them. The mob goes quiet. The hostility drains out of the scene. One by one, the residents of Quahog begin to apologize. They embrace Simpson. They shake his hand. The anger that had been building through the entire episode dissolves in about 90 seconds of sincere, well-delivered speechmaking. Simpson's voice in this episode is provided by Mike Henry, a series regular who also voices Cleveland Brown and several other recurring characters. The performance matters here. Henry plays the speech with enough genuine feeling that the scene almost works as straight drama. The audience is almost convinced alongside the mob. The episode has done enough work building Simpson's case, showing his sadness on the golf course, his patience with Peter's family, his genuine distress at being hated wherever he goes, that the speech lands as a real moment rather than a setup. Then, in the space of about 3 seconds, Simpson pulls a knife out and stabs 3 people. He runs. The mob immediately resumes chasing him with exactly the same energy they had before the speech. Peter watches his new friend sprint away from an angry crowd and says in a tone of complete resignation, "I guess he did do it." That is how the episode ends. No further commentary, no moral, no attempt to explain whether the speech was sincere or calculated. The show simply lets the moment happen and walks away from it, which is a creative choice that is more honest about the Simpson situation than most actual journalism managed to be. The speech was real, and the stabbing was real, and both things can be true simultaneously, and the show has no interest in telling you which one to hold on to. At the end of the episode, Mayor Adam West shouts that Quahog does not want Simpson there and does not love him the way they did in 1993. The camera then cuts to Homer Simpson saying his signature word of frustration. The show worked a dig at The Simpsons into an OJ Simpson episode, using the shared last name as the hinge. The episode received mixed reviews when it aired. Some critics found it funny, others found it too late. A joke about a 1995 trial running in 2009 felt like material the show had held past its expiration date. The 3-minute Conway Twitty segment embedded in the middle of the episode drew particular criticism. Series creator Seth MacFarlane has acknowledged in interviews that the recurring Conway Twitty cutaways were used to pad episode length when the writers ran short on material, and this episode's version is the longest and most notorious example of the device. But the episode's cultural shelf life turned out to be longer than its critics expected, for reasons nobody involved in making it could have predicted. OJ Simpson died on April 10, 2024. He was 76 years old. His family announced the death with a social media post. Within hours, the internet had generated an enormous volume of jokes, memes, and references, most of them treating his death as a punchline rather than a loss. "The juice is loose" was immediately revisited by people who had not thought about it in years. The reviews on the episode's IMDb page began filling up with new entries from people writing about watching it after his death, with multiple reviewers noting that the episode hit completely differently now that Simpson was gone for good. One reviewer wrote that it was a lot better now. Another said it was quite brilliant, to say the least. A third said he was finally able to properly enjoy it. The show had not changed. Simpson had died. And the distance between the living man, the acquitted man, the convicted man, the dead man, and the cartoon version the show had constructed in 2009 had collapsed into a single point that the audience could now look at from the outside. That is the specific quality of O.J. Simpson's Family Guy appearances that separates them from everything else in this essay. Not that the jokes were crueler, or more specific, or better constructed, but that they had more time to marinate, more real-world events to absorb into themselves, more chances for the meaning to shift without the show doing anything at all. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Kanye West is a target that works completely differently, because with Kanye, the problem was never that reality would catch up to the jokes. The problem was that reality kept moving so fast and in such strange directions that the jokes could barely keep up with the actual man. Section 6. Kanye West, the show that couldn't keep up with the real thing. There is a specific problem that comes with trying to parody someone whose real behavior is already more extreme than anything a writer's room would feel comfortable putting on television. Family Guy has spent over 2 decades building a reputation for going further than any other animated show on network television. It has turned real actors into cartoon villains. It has staged fake confessions to real murders. It has reimagined television opening credits to show unconscious women. The show's entire identity is built around the idea that nothing is too far, that no target is too sacred, and that the joke always gets to go where the joke needs to go. Kanye West broke that model completely. Not because the show stopped trying. The writers kept going after him across multiple seasons and multiple episodes, using different angles and different formats, landing jokes that were genuinely funny in isolation. But something kept happening. By the time an episode featuring a Kanye joke would air, the real Kanye had already done something that made the joke feel mild by comparison. The show was writing satire about a man whose actual behavior had moved so far past satire that the cartoon version could not catch him. This is a problem no other celebrity in Family Guy's history created for the show in quite the same way. To understand how the Kanye material developed, start with the jokes that came first. The ones from a period when his public behavior was still operating within a range that felt exaggerated but recognizable. The 2009 MTV Video Music Awards gave the show its most reliable Kanye reference point, and it kept returning to it for years. The incident itself is well documented. Taylor Swift won the award for Best Female Video for her song You Belong With Me. She came on stage to accept it. Before she could finish her speech, Kanye West walked up, took the microphone from her hand, and told the audience that Beyoncé had one of the best videos of all time, implying Swift's win was undeserved. Swift stood there. The audience reacted with a mixture of shock and booing. Beyoncé, when she won an award later that night, brought Swift back on stage to finish her speech. The moment became one of the most referenced celebrity incidents of the entire decade. Family Guy used it in Chris Has Got a Date, Season 15, Episode 5, which aired on November 20th, 2016. The episode's main story involves Chris Griffin getting a date to his school's homecoming dance with a fictionalized version of Taylor Swift. Chris makes a collage of things Swift likes so he can connect with her. The items in the collage include various Swift-associated things. One of the items is a photograph of Kanye West with his mouth closed. The joke is not explained. It does not need to be. Anyone watching in 2016 understood immediately that Taylor Swift's preferred version of Kanye West is one that is not talking, specifically not talking over her acceptance speeches. The image does not require a caption. The silence is the punchline. This is Family Guy at its most efficient. One image, no dialogue, maximum damage. The Kanye Kanes appear in Don't Be a Dickens at Christmas, Season 16, Episode 9, which aired on December 17th, 2017. The Griffin family is putting up Christmas decorations. Meg pulls out a set of candy canes labeled Kanye Canes for the stockings. The joke is that these candy canes, like Kanye himself, come with elaborate and unexpected explanations of straightforward things. A candy cane does not require a philosophical statement about its shape or its color. Kanye would provide one anyway. The product exists, in the logic of the joke, because someone looked at a simple object and thought it needed more Kanye energy applied to it. The joke is gentle by Family Guy standards. It is the kind of dig that acknowledges the target as a cultural fixture without going anywhere particularly dark. In the context of what the show would eventually do with Kanye, it reads almost like warm-up material. The bachelor party cutaway in Married with Cancer is where the show shifts into a different gear. Married with Cancer is Season 17, Episode 2, which aired on October 7th, 2018. The episode's main story involves Brian getting married. Quagmire, setting up what he promises will be the wildest bachelor party anyone has ever attended, tells Brian that it is going to be crazier than whatever Kanye West is doing at this particular moment. The cutaway then shows exactly what Kanye West is doing at this particular moment. He is in a kitchen. He is wearing a white outfit. He is standing over a tray of lasagna. He is massaging the lasagna with both hands, moving his palms slowly across the surface of it, deeply committed to what he is doing. He is covered in sauce and cheese. He looks directly at whoever is watching him and announces, "I am giving this lasagna a massage," while preparing to announce that I am joining ISIS. Thank you for your interest. The scene ends. The show moves on. The joke works on a specific structure that the Kanye material consistently uses. It takes two real things about him and combines them. The first real thing is that Kanye has a documented history of making announcements that seem completely disconnected from anything that was happening around them. Statements that arrive without context and depart without resolution, leaving the audience unsure whether they witnessed something important or something that would be forgotten within a week. The second real thing is that the announcements kept getting more extreme over time, escalating past the point where a reasonable audience could predict what was coming next. The lasagna massage plus the ISIS announcement is the show's attempt to represent what that escalation felt like from the outside. It was not enough to have him say something strange. The strangeness had to have a physical component, something visual and absurd, because the verbal element alone no longer captured how far outside normal behavior his public moments had gone. In Fat Actor, Season 21, Episode 8, Peter cuts off one of Kanye's rants. The rant is not described in detail. It does not need to be. The joke is that Peter's interruption is not about the content of what Kanye is saying. He stops Kanye mid-sentence to point out that he is wearing shoes in the house. The whole elaborate thing Kanye was building toward, whatever conspiracy or announcement or creative statement he was delivering, gets redirected by a completely mundane household complaint. The structure of the joke implies that Kanye's monologues have become so frequent and so detached from practical reality that the correct response is no longer engagement. The correct response is to notice that he has his shoes on inside and deal with that instead. This is the point where the Kanye material starts to reveal its central problem. Each of these jokes, the silent photo, the candy canes, the lasagna, the interrupted rant, was written as an exaggeration. The show was taking real Kanye behavior and pushing it further than it actually went, which is the standard satirical operation. You find the truth about someone, and you stretch it until the stretch itself becomes funny. But Kanye kept stretching faster than the show could. By the time the lasagna episode aired in 2018, Kanye had already been to the White House to meet with President Donald Trump while wearing a Make America Great Again hat, and delivered a lengthy monologue in the Oval Office that included statements about hydrogen-powered planes, a male energy he claimed to experience while wearing the hat, and his belief that the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution should be abolished. This visit was covered live on television. Journalists described it in real time using words that would have sounded like exaggeration if a comedy writer had invented the scene. A cartoon of Kanye massaging lasagna and announcing he was joining ISIS, which was designed to feel like an absurd escalation beyond anything real, was now competing with footage from the actual Oval Office. The show did not have a structural answer to this problem. It kept producing Kanye jokes. Some of them landed. The silent photo in the Chris episode remains one of the most economical celebrity jokes the show has ever written. The bachelor party cutaway is genuinely funny as a standalone piece of animation. But the cumulative effect of all of them together is a show that keeps swinging at a target that keeps stepping further back, so that each swing lands in a place the target used to be standing, rather than where he actually is. What the Kanye material reveals, when you look at all of it together, is the outer edge of what Family Guy's satirical model can actually do. The model works best when the target has a fixed, identifiable quality that can be isolated and exaggerated. James Woods is controlling and vindictive. Take that further. Tom Cruise is short and devoted to Scientology. Take that further. Jay Leno has a large chin and a bad sense of humor. Take that further. Kanye does not have a fixed, identifiable quality. He has a constantly shifting set of positions, announcements, beliefs, and behaviors that change faster than a production schedule can track. By the time a joke about something he said in January has been written, animated, reviewed, approved, and aired in November, the version of Kanye the joke was built around no longer exists. A new version has already replaced it and done 3 more things that the old joke does not cover. Every other celebrity in this essay stayed still enough for the show to hit them cleanly. Kanye kept moving, and the show, for all its willingness to go anywhere and say anything, never quite figured out how to write a joke fast enough to land on a target that would not stop changing. The cutaway gag format that gives Family Guy so much of its power, the ability to drop into a scene, deliver a joke in 4 seconds, and leave, was designed for fixed targets. Kanye is not a fixed target. He is a moving one. And the show's entire model of celebrity destruction depends on being able to hold someone still long enough to take the shot. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That problem does not exist with the next group of targets, because when Family Guy turns its attention from individual celebrities toward the broader mechanics of how it destroys them, the cutaway gag itself, used as a precision tool across dozens of different famous people, the target does not move at all. Section 7. Michael Jackson, the most complicated target. Every celebrity this show has gone after falls into a recognizable category. Some of them are living targets with active careers, and the mockery is part of the ongoing conversation about who they are and what they represent. Some of them are fallen figures whose reputations collapsed under the weight of their own behavior, and the show uses that collapse as raw material. Some of them participated willingly, voiced themselves, and absorbed the jokes as the price of continued cultural relevance. Michael Jackson does not fit cleanly into any of these categories. He sits in a space that is genuinely uncomfortable and has never been fully resolved, either by the show or by the broader culture that both produced and consumed him. And the way Family Guy handled him across more than 2 decades of episodes is a record of how difficult that space actually is to navigate when your entire creative identity is built around having no limits. Start with what Michael Jackson was before the accusations against him became the dominant fact of his public life. He was, by any reasonable measure, the most famous entertainer in the world during the 1980s and into the 1990s. The Thriller album, released in 1982, became the best-selling album in recorded history. His videos were broadcast events. His performances were studied and copied by generations of dancers. His face was on more magazine covers than any other entertainer of his era. He was not simply famous. He was a category of famous that did not previously exist and has not quite existed in the same way since. He was also, by the time Family Guy began airing in 1999, a deeply strange public figure whose personal life had become the subject of intense scrutiny, legal proceedings, and widespread suspicion. His 1993 civil lawsuit, settled out of court, involved allegations of child sexual abuse. His physical appearance had changed so dramatically from his early career that it had become a major cultural conversation in itself. His 2003 documentary interview with journalist Martin Bashir, in which he discussed sharing his bedroom with children and said he saw nothing wrong with it, generated enormous controversy. His 2005 criminal trial on charges of child molestation ended in an acquittal on all counts. Family Guy was running through all of this in real time, and the show's approach to Jackson across that period is genuinely inconsistent in ways that are worth examining carefully. The early Michael Jackson jokes in Family Guy are primarily about his physical appearance and his stage performance style. The show references his famous on-stage movements, the moonwalk, the crotch grab, the specific way he held his body during performances. These are standard celebrity parody territory. The audience recognizes what is being referenced, and the recognition is the joke. Nothing about these early gags requires the show to take a position on anything more complicated than the observation that Jackson moved in a distinctive way. Then the show starts moving toward darker territory. In Stewie Loves Lois, Season 5, Episode 1, which aired on September 10, 2006, there's a scene where Stewie testifies in a courtroom against Michael Jackson. The scene is brief. It does not specify what Stewie is testifying about, but it exists in the context of Jackson's 2005 criminal trial, which had concluded just the previous year with his acquittal, and the implication of what kind of trial Stewie would be testifying in is not left ambiguous by the show's framing. Stewie testifying against Jackson, a child witness, in a trial. The audience is expected to connect the dots without the show drawing the line directly. This is the same sideways accusation structure the show used with Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein, taking a real allegation, refusing to state it plainly, and building the joke around the gap between what is said and what is meant. The difference is that the Spacey and Weinstein jokes turned out to be pointing at something that later became established as factual. The Jackson trial ended in acquittal. The show's implication that Stewie would testify against him exists in a legal context where Jackson was found not guilty. The show did not acknowledge this distinction. It treated the acquittal as irrelevant to the joke. In 420, Season 7, Episode 12, which aired on April 19, 2009, there is a scene showing Michael Jackson and Stewie in bed together. This episode aired on April 19, 2009. Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009. The gap between those two dates is 67 days. The show did not pull the episode after Jackson's death. It did not issue a statement about the scene. The episode remained in rotation as part of the regular broadcast schedule. Whatever calculation went into that decision, and it was certainly a decision someone made consciously rather than simply an oversight, the result was that a scene placing Jackson in a child's bedroom aired less than 10 weeks before his death and continued to circulate afterward. The Courtship of Stewie's Father, Season 4, Episode 17, which aired on November 13, 2005, includes a scene at Disney World. Stewie and Peter watch a 3D film at the park that features Michael Jackson. The scene is brief and plays on Jackson's long-documented relationship with the Disney theme parks and his personal friendship with Walt Disney's legacy. Jackson visited Disney parks regularly throughout his life and had a close personal connection to the park's aesthetic and atmosphere. The show uses this real-world association as the basis for the joke, placing him in a Disney context where both things about him, the beloved entertainer and the complicated figure, exist simultaneously without the show resolving the tension between them. What is interesting about the Family Guy Michael Jackson material, when you look at all of it together, is how the show handles a specific problem that none of the other celebrity sections in this essay quite create. With James Woods, the target participated. With Cosby, the target was eventually convicted of crimes that confirmed what the jokes implied. With Spacey and Weinstein, the targets were publicly accused and largely believed. With OJ Simpson, the civil suit found him liable even after the criminal acquittal. In every other case, there is some external event or outcome that the show can point to as justification, either implicit or explicit, for the mockery it delivered. With Michael Jackson, the external outcome is an acquittal. The jury heard the evidence and found him not guilty. The legal system produced a verdict. Family Guy ignored that verdict entirely in how it framed him, and continued making jokes that assumed the accusations were true without ever stating that assumption plainly. This is the most legally and ethically complicated position the show has ever occupied with regard to a celebrity target. It is also the position the show has never publicly explained or defended, in the way MacFarlane explained the Weinstein joke or acknowledged the Spacey situation. Then Jackson died in June 2009, and the situation became even more layered. The show continued referencing Jackson after his death. It did not treat his passing as a reason to retire the material. In later seasons, Jackson appears in various brief forms, referenced in dialogue, invoked as a cultural shorthand, used as a punchline in contexts that have nothing to do with the allegations and everything to do with his music and his performance legacy. This created a specific split in how the show was using him. On one side, jokes that implied guilt for acts a jury found him not guilty of committing. On the other side, jokes that treated him as a cultural icon whose music and performances were part of the shared vocabulary of the show's audience. Both versions of Michael Jackson exist inside Family Guy's history with him, and the show never chose between them. The broader culture has had the same problem and has not resolved it either. His music continues to be played everywhere. Tribute performances happen regularly. At the same time, a 2019 documentary called Leaving Neverland presented detailed accounts from two men who said Jackson had abused them when they were children. Some radio stations stopped playing his music after the documentary aired. Others did not. Streaming numbers went down briefly and then recovered. The debate about how to hold his musical legacy alongside the accusations against him continues with no clear resolution. Family Guy was working inside that same unresolved tension across its entire run, without the tools, or apparently the inclination, to address the tension directly. The jokes about the accusations treated them as settled facts. The jokes about the music and performances treated them as separate from the accusations. The show never attempted to reconcile these two positions, because reconciling them would require taking a position the show was unwilling to publicly commit to. What that reluctance reveals is something specific about how Family Guy's model of celebrity destruction actually operates. The model works cleanly when the target is a clear villain, convicted, confessed, or so thoroughly established as guilty in public perception that the gap between the joke's implication and legal reality does not matter. It works less cleanly when the target exists in genuine ambiguity, where the jury came back not guilty, where the accusations are real and serious and contested simultaneously. Michael Jackson is the place where the show's confidence in its own judgment runs up against a situation its judgment was not equipped to handle. The show kept making the jokes anyway, and the audience kept watching them. And nobody involved, not the writers, not the network, not the cultural machinery that circulated the episodes, ever fully stopped to account for the gap between what the jokes assumed and what the legal record actually said. That gap is the most honest thing about the Michael Jackson section of Family Guy's history. Not the jokes themselves, but the show's complete unwillingness to examine what it was doing by making them. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next section is about the part of Family Guy's celebrity destruction that operates below the level of full episodes and storylines. The cutaway gag as a standalone weapon, applied to targets like Jay Leno, John Travolta, and Ryan Reynolds in ways that reveal how much damage the show can do in 4 seconds when it decides to aim carefully. Section 8. The cutaway as a weapon. Jay Leno, John Travolta, and the architecture of the one-line destruction. There is a version of celebrity mockery that requires time and space to work. You need an episode, you need a plot, you need the target to show up inside the story in some form, interact with the regular characters, generate consequences, and exit the episode having been changed or having changed something around them. James Woods needed 8 episodes across 11 seasons. OJ Simpson needed a full half-hour with a mob and a speech and a knife. Even Tom Cruise needed a recurring character with his own arc across multiple seasons to deliver the full scope of what the show wanted to say about him. And then there is the other version. 4 seconds, 1 image. No setup beyond a single line of dialogue that functions purely as a door being opened so the joke can walk through it. The cutaway gag is the tool that Family Guy built its reputation on more than any other, and when it is aimed at a celebrity rather than a situation or a concept, it operates with a precision that the longer format cannot match. The longer format gives the target room to breathe, room to be complicated, room to earn something resembling sympathy before the show takes it away. The cutaway gives the target nothing. It identifies one specific thing, delivers one specific judgment, and disappears before anyone has time to object. Jay Leno is the best example of what sustained cutaway mockery looks like when it is applied to a single target across multiple seasons without ever escalating to a full episode. Leno hosted The Tonight Show on NBC from 1992 to 2009, and then again from 2010 to 2014, after a brief and famously troubled handover to Conan O'Brien. He was one of the most recognizable faces in American late-night television for over 2 decades. His tenure on the show was consistently rated, consistently profitable, and consistently criticized by a specific segment of the entertainment world that found his comedy too safe, too toothless, and too committed to never offending anyone who might be watching. Family Guy noticed all of this and built a version of Leno that exaggerates every element of the criticism into something visual and unmistakable. The first thing the show commits to is the chin. The animated version of Jay Leno always features a chin that is dramatically larger than his actual chin, which is itself notably large by normal human standards. The cartoon version takes this feature and inflates it to the point where it becomes the defining visual fact of the character. Not his hair, not his eyes, not his clothing, but this one specific physical feature that the show has decided is the thing about Leno. Every time the animated Leno appears on screen, the chin arrives first. It precedes him. It announces him. The audience sees the chin and knows immediately who is coming. This is not an accident of design. It is a calculated choice about how to reduce a person to a single identifiable element that can be deployed efficiently across multiple quick appearances without requiring any further setup. The chin is the shorthand. The shorthand is the joke. In I Dream of Jesus, Season 7, Episode 2, which aired on October 5, 2008, Leno's voice and delivery style are mocked directly. The show goes after the specific rhythm of his comedy, the way he builds to a punchline, the cadence that critics had spent years describing as predictable and overly polished. The animated Leno delivers jokes in a way that is recognizable as Leno, but stripped of any genuine comedic energy, as if the surface mechanics of his performance style have been preserved while everything underneath has been removed. In Screams of Silence, the story of Brenda Q, Season 10, Episode 3, which aired on November 13, 2011, the mockery returns with a focus on his laugh and his delivery, pushing further into the idea that Leno's comedy is a performance of being funny, rather than actually being funny. The King is Dead, Season 2, Episode 7, which aired on March 28, 2000, contains one of the stranger Leno jokes in the show's history. Stewie is portrayed as a passionate defender of Jay Leno. When Peter makes fun of Leno's terrible sense of humor, Stewie argues back vehemently. The joke works on a specific irony. Stewie, a murderous infant supergenius with famously sophisticated and dark tastes, has chosen Jay Leno as his entertainment hero. The gap between what Stewie is and what Leno represents is the entire joke. The show is mocking Leno by having its least likely character defend him. In Underage Peter, Season 14, Episode 6, which aired on January 4th, 2016, the show turns to Leno's clothing. The specific target is his well-documented love of denim. Leno is famous in real life for wearing denim constantly and enthusiastically, and for owning an extraordinary collection of denim clothing. The show takes this known fact and treats it as a character flaw significant enough to be worth mocking in a primetime animated series. The accumulation of Leno jokes across all these seasons never builds to anything. There is no confrontation. There is no episode where Leno enters Quahog and has to face consequences. The show simply returns to him periodically, picks a different angle, the chin, the voice, the laugh, the denim,
the comedy style, and delivers another quick assessment before moving on. The effect over time is of a reputation being slowly reduced through attrition rather than through any single decisive blow. John Travolta gets a completely different treatment, built around a completely different kind of joke that the show commits to with unusual consistency. Travolta's career in real life is defined by its dramatic arc. He was a major star in the 1970s with Saturday Night Fever and Grease, went through a long period of diminished relevance through the 1980s, and then experienced one of the most celebrated career revivals in Hollywood history with Pulp Fiction in 1994. He is also a longtime member of the Church of Scientology, which connects him to the Tom Cruise material in the show's history. And there have been, throughout his career, persistent rumors and allegations about his personal life that he has consistently denied. Family Guy chose one of these angles and stuck with it completely. The show's position on John Travolta is stated in Petergeist, Season 4, Episode 26, which aired on May 7th, 2006. A cutaway shows Travolta at his wedding. He is standing at the altar. He begins his vows. In the middle of the vows, he becomes confused. He mentions his wife Kelly Preston's penis. That is the entire joke. It lasts about 6 seconds. The implication is clear, and the show does not elaborate on it. The same implication returns in Mr. and Mrs. Stewie, Season 10, Episode 17, which aired on April 15, 2012. Peter is upset because Lois has bought twin beds for their bedroom, separating them during sleep. He complains about their new sleeping arrangement by comparing it to the sleeping arrangement of John Travolta and Kelly Preston. The comparison is the joke. The show is using the same implication it established in the earlier episode as a reference point for a completely different situation, trusting that the audience remembers the first joke and will make the connection without being walked through it again. This is what sustained cutaway mockery looks like when it is working efficiently. The show builds a specific idea about a target, embeds it in one episode, and then returns to it in later episodes as a known fact that needs no additional explanation. The first joke does the heavy lifting. Every subsequent reference is lighter because the work has already been done. Ryan Reynolds presents the most interesting case in this section because he is the only one of the three who actually participated in his own mockery. Reynolds guest starred in Stewie Goes for a Drive, Season 10, Episode 4, which aired on October 9, 2011, voicing a homoerotic version of himself. The character Reynolds plays in the episode spends his appearances with Peter implying attraction to him in various ways. He draws attention to his low-riding pants. He tries to get Peter to tickle his lower abdomen. He becomes unusually intimate at dinner. He comments on Peter's physical qualities in ways that are clearly designed to make Peter uncomfortable. Reynolds is doing all of this himself. He wrote none of it. The writer's room constructed the entire character,
but he showed up and performed it. He read lines that turned him into the punchline, and delivered them with enough commitment that the jokes work. He is, in the language of celebrity participation in mockery, what is sometimes called a good sport, a famous person who understands that accepting the joke rather than fighting it is both more dignified and more funny than the alternative. This is the opposite of the Leno approach, where the target has no involvement and the mockery builds entirely through the show's own observations. With Reynolds, the show handed him the material and he used it on himself. The result is a different kind of ego destruction, one where the target is complicit in his own reduction, which carries its own specific charge. What all three of these cases, Leno, Travolta, Reynolds, demonstrate together is the range of what the cutaway format can do when it is applied to celebrity targets at different levels of commitment. Leno gets the slow accumulation, many jokes across many seasons, each one picking a slightly different angle, none of them requiring the others to make sense, all of them pointing at the same general assessment that builds up over time into something that feels like a verdict, even though no single joke is strong enough to deliver one on its own. Travolta gets the single fixed idea applied repeatedly. One angle, established early, returned to consistently, treated as settled fact every time it reappears. The show never expands the Travolta material because it does not need to. The one joke it decided to make about him contains everything the show wants to say. Reynolds gets the participation model. The target is handed the weapon and asked to use it on himself. The ego destruction happens with his full cooperation and is therefore funnier and stranger than either of the other approaches. Three completely different tools producing three completely different effects. All of them using 4 seconds or less to deliver something that a full episode would struggle to match in efficiency. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The show's political targets work differently from all three of these models, because when Family Guy turns its attention to people who hold actual power rather than cultural fame, the jokes change shape in ways that reveal something specific about what the show is actually willing to say and to whom. Section 9. Bill Clinton, Sean Hannity, and Political Egos. How the show handles power differently than fame. There is a line inside Family Guy that most people watching the show have never consciously noticed, but that the show has been drawing consistently across its entire run. On one side of that line are celebrities. Actors, musicians, athletes, television personalities, people whose power comes from public attention and whose ego is built on the idea that the world finds them interesting, talented, or worth watching. The show goes after these people with creativity and specificity. It builds characters out of them. It finds the angle that nobody else has taken and commits to it across multiple seasons. It turns their specific quirks, their specific scandals, and their specific public failures into raw material for jokes that are genuinely inventive in their construction. On the other side of that line are politicians, people whose power comes not from public attention, but from actual authority, the ability to make decisions that affect other people's lives, to direct money and military force and law, to determine in real and concrete ways what the country does and who it does it to. The show goes after these people too, but it goes after them differently. The jokes are blunter. The angles are more predictable. The creativity that the show brings to a James Woods or a Tom Cruise largely disappears when the target is a senator or a president or a cable news host, replaced by a more straightforward version of mockery that any late-night comedian could have produced. Understanding why that difference exists tells you something important about what Family Guy is actually doing when it destroys a celebrity ego, and what it is choosing not to do when the target has real power. Bill Clinton is the clearest example of how the show handles political figures, because his tenure as president overlaps with the early seasons of Family Guy, and because he gave the show one angle so dominant that it never needed to find another. Clinton served as the 42nd President of the United States from January 1993 to January 2001. His presidency was defined by economic expansion, a budget surplus, and a series of international policy decisions that remain debated. It was also defined, in the public memory that Family Guy draws on, almost entirely by one thing: his relationship with White House intern Monica Lewinsky, which became public in 1998 and led to his impeachment by the House of Representatives. He was acquitted by the Senate and served the remainder of his term, but the Lewinsky situation permanently attached itself to his name in American culture in a way that nothing else about his presidency has matched. Family Guy uses this as its only Clinton joke. Every appearance Clinton makes in the show, every reference to him in dialogue, every cutaway built around his name connects back to the same point. He had an affair with an intern. The affair became a national scandal. The scandal defined his legacy. The show has nothing else to say about him and makes no attempt to find anything else. This is in direct contrast to how the show handles, for example, James Woods, where the show builds an entirely original mythology around the target that goes far beyond anything in the public record. The Clinton material does not invent anything. It takes the most well-known fact about the man and repeats it in different forms without adding a new perspective or finding a new angle on why that fact matters. The reason for this difference is worth sitting with. Clinton is a former president. He held the most powerful elected office in the United States for 8 years. Jokes about his affair are safe because the affair is already established public knowledge, already processed by the culture, already reduced to a punchline that everyone understands and nobody is surprised by. Making a Clinton affair joke in 2005 or 2010 or 2015 is not provocative. It is nostalgic. It is a reference to something the audience already agrees was funny and embarrassing, delivered in a context where the only risk is being slightly stale.
That is a very different operation from the Kevin Spacey basement joke, which was making an implied accusation about something that had not yet become public fact. Or the Weinstein Oscar joke, which was expressing genuine personal anger about a powerful man's criminal behavior. Or even the tiny Tom Cruise material, which invented an entirely new satirical framework for mocking someone who had not asked for it. Clinton jokes in Family Guy are safe in a way that the show's best celebrity mockery never is. And safe jokes, in the context of what this show can do when it is operating without a safety net, read as a choice to pull back rather than to push forward. Sean Hannity is a more interesting case because the show's approach to him is less about a specific scandal and more about a specific kind of cruelty that the show does not usually direct at political figures. Hannity is a conservative political commentator who has hosted programs on Fox News for decades. He is one of the most watched figures in cable news, with a loyal audience and an equally committed group of critics who find his commentary dishonest, inflammatory, and driven more by political loyalty than by factual accuracy. He is not a politician in the sense of holding elected office, which puts him in a slightly different category from Clinton. He is a media figure whose power comes from influence rather than authority, which places him closer to the celebrity end of the spectrum, even though his content is political. The show's most notable Hannity moment happens in Adam West High, Season 15, Episode 7, which aired on April 10, 2017. Peter, Quagmire, Joe, and Cleveland are together when a photograph of Hannity comes up. Rather than moving past it, the four of them begin competing against each other to deliver the most cutting insult about the photograph. They spend close to a full minute trading jokes about Hannity, each one trying to outdo the last in terms of cruelty and specificity. The jokes focus almost entirely on his physical appearance in the photograph, rather than on his commentary, his politics, or his professional record. This is an unusual choice. The show knows how to make political jokes. It makes them constantly, about presidents and public figures with far more power than Hannity. But when it gets to Hannity, it goes after how he looks in a picture. It turns what could have been sharp political commentary into something closer to middle school lunch table humor. Four guys trying to one-up each other with appearance-based insults about someone who is not in the room. The Hannity scene is funny in a specific way, but it is also revealing. The show is capable of much more precise and much more damaging commentary about public figures when it chooses to be. The Hannity jokes do not attempt that precision. They go for the easiest available target, physical appearance, and pile onto it until the scene ends. In Ocean's 3.5, Season 7, Episode 10, which aired on March 29, 2009, Hannity appears in a cutaway making an argument to Alan Colmes. Colmes was Hannity's longtime co-host on the Fox News program Hannity and Colmes, which ran from 1996 to 2009. In the Family Guy version of this exchange, Colmes has been replaced by Droopy, the slow-talking cartoon dog character from MGM animated shorts. Hannity is making a nonsensical argument. Droopy sits across from him. The implication is that Hannity's arguments are so lacking in logic that a sleepy cartoon dog is a perfectly adequate debate partner for them. This joke is sharper than the Adam West High material. It has an actual point, that Hannity's political commentary is less about genuine debate and more about the performance of having an argument, and that the quality of the opposing voice makes no difference to how the performance plays out. Droopy is not chosen randomly. Droopy is slow, easily confused, and entirely passive. The joke is that these qualities make him as effective a Colmes replacement as anyone else would be. George W. Bush, the 43rd President of the United States, who served from January 2001 to January 2009, receives the most consistent political mockery in the show's history, across the seasons that overlap with his presidency. The Bush jokes in Family Guy are built almost entirely around one characterization, that he is not particularly intelligent and is not particularly curious about the world he is governing. This was a common comedic angle during Bush's presidency. Saturday Night Live built extended parodies around it. Late-night hosts returned to it constantly, and it became the default mode of political comedy during that era. Family Guy's version of the Bush mockery draws from the same well without adding much that was not already circulating in the broader comedic culture. What is notable about the Bush material in the context of this section is how it compares to the show's treatment of figures from the entertainment world during the same period. In the years between 2001 and 2009, when the show was regularly producing Bush jokes that fit neatly into what every other comedy outlet was doing, it was simultaneously constructing the James Woods mythology, a genuinely original, sustained, multi-episode piece of satirical work that had no equivalent anywhere else in television. The creativity the show applied to a Hollywood actor dwarfs what it applied to a sitting president. This comparison is not a criticism of Family Guy's politics. It is an observation about where the show's actual creative energy goes and does not go. The show is funnier, more inventive, and more committed when it targets people whose power comes from fame rather than people whose power comes from office. The reasons for this are probably practical as much as creative. Jokes about sitting presidents carry legal and political risks that jokes about actors do not, and the show's legal team is clearly involved in decisions about what goes to air. But the result is a visible difference in quality and ambition between the two categories of target. Donald Trump, who became the 45th President of the United States in January 2017, receives Family Guy's most sustained political mockery of any president the show has covered. The show began making Trump jokes before his presidency, during his period as a celebrity businessman and reality television personality on The Apprentice, and then escalated significantly after his election. The jokes cover his speaking style, his physical appearance, his business record, his political positions, and his behavior in office. The Trump material is more voluminous than the Bush material and shares some of its creative limitations. It tends toward the obvious angle rather than the unexpected one, hitting targets that every other comedy outlet was hitting simultaneously rather than finding the angle that only Family Guy could deliver. The show's Trump jokes are frequently funny, but they rarely do anything with the target that requires the specific tools and history of Family Guy to produce. They could have come from any political comedy show operating during the same period. What all of this adds up to, Clinton, Hannity, Bush, Trump, is a pattern that runs consistently through the show's political content. The jokes land. The audiences laugh. The mockery is real and sometimes sharp. But the show is operating with one hand tied behind its back when it goes after political power, and the other hand, the one that produced Tiny Tom Cruise and the James Woods crate and the Cosby Show opening credits recut, is the more interesting one. The most honest explanation for why this is true probably comes back to something simple. The show knows its audience and knows what its audience watches political comedy for. They want confirmation that the people in power deserve to be mocked. They want the familiar angles delivered with the show's specific voice. They are not necessarily asking for something they have never seen before. With celebrities, the audience wants something different. They want to be surprised. They want an angle they did not know was available. They want the show to find something about a famous person that they had been looking at for years without fully seeing. That is where Family Guy does its best work. And that gap between what the show is capable of with a celebrity and what it is willing to do with a politician is the most honest thing in this entire essay about what kind of show Family Guy actually is underneath all the noise. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The last section of this essay does not look at individual targets at all. It looks at the people who got to look back, the celebrities who saw what Family Guy did to them and had to decide how to respond. Because how a famous person handles being destroyed by a cartoon turns out to reveal more about them than the cartoon ever could on its own. Section 10. The Ones Who Bit Back. Celebrity Reactions and What They Reveal. Everything covered in this essay so far has been told from one direction. The show picks a target, the show constructs its joke, the show fires. The joke lands in the culture, gets watched by millions of people, gets clipped and shared and referenced, and becomes part of how the public thinks about whoever was in the crosshairs. That is the story from Family Guy's side of the exchange, the side with the writer's room, the animation budget, the network platform, and the legal team deciding what can and cannot go to air. But there is another side, the person being fired at. Every celebrity this show has gone after had a moment where someone in their life, a publicist, a family member, a friend, a stranger on the internet, brought the joke to their attention. Every one of them had to make a decision about what to do with it. Fight back, laugh along, ignore it completely, participate in it, file a legal complaint, call Seth MacFarlane personally, go on television and express hurt feelings, or simply absorb it and keep moving, hoping that engaging with a cartoon would create more damage than the cartoon itself already had. The decisions these celebrities made in response to being mocked by Family Guy turn out to be more revealing than almost anything the show said about them. Because how a famous person handles public humiliation tells you things about their character, their self-awareness, and their relationship with their own reputation that no interview, no profile piece, and no carefully managed public appearance ever could. Start with the most complicated response in the show's history, which belongs to James Woods. Woods did not just tolerate the mockery, he participated in it. He voiced himself across 8 separate episodes, sat in recording sessions, and performed lines describing a version of himself who commits crimes, steals identities, eats people's limbs while on drugs, and generally behaves as a cartoon sociopath. He did this repeatedly, over years, without ever publicly expressing discomfort with the material. The question of why is not answerable with certainty, but the evidence points in a specific direction. Woods has a documented reputation in real life as someone who is combative, argumentative, and highly protective of how he is perceived. He has been involved in public disputes throughout his career. He is not, by any reasonable reading of his public behavior, someone who absorbs attacks quietly. And yet he kept coming back to Family Guy, 8 times.
The most likely explanation is that Woods understood something specific about the dynamic between a celebrity and a show that is mocking them. If you fight the joke, you give it more attention than it would have received on its own. If you sue, you become the celebrity who sued a cartoon and lost. Or worse, the celebrity who sued a cartoon and created 3 years of headlines that kept the original joke in circulation. But if you show up, voice yourself, perform the material, and demonstrate that you find the whole thing funny, you control the story. You are not the victim of the joke. You are in on it. Woods chose to be in on it. Whether that choice came from genuine amusement, strategic thinking, or a combination of both is something only he knows. But the result is that his Family Guy appearances are the most interesting celebrity collaborations in the show's history, precisely because the target was also the performer, and the performance required him to portray himself as the villain of his own story. George Lucas handled his situation with a combination of caution and eventual generosity that nobody involved in making the show fully expected. Family Guy's Star Wars parodies required Lucas's permission to produce. The show could not simply use the Star Wars characters, settings, music, and story without the approval of Lucasfilm, which Lucas controlled at the time. Getting that permission required showing Lucas what the show intended to do with material he had spent decades building and protecting. McFarlane and the production team screened the first Star Wars parody, Blue Harvest, for Lucas at his ranch before it aired. The room was tense. The Family Guy team, by McFarlane's own account, half expected Lucas to watch the parody of his life's work and pull the plug on the whole project. Instead, Lucas watched the screening and laughed a few times. He approved it for broadcast. The second Star Wars parody required more negotiation. Lucas took issue with a specific 4-letter word used in the episode, and with some of the darker jokes built into the material. He did not approve everything. He pushed back on specific elements and required changes before he would sign off. But he ultimately approved that episode too, and the third parody followed the same pattern, Lucasfilm not allowing everything, but allowing, as McFarlane put it, Family Guy to be Family Guy. What Lucas's response reveals is a sophisticated understanding of what parody does and does not do to the thing being parodied. The Star Wars films were not diminished by the Family Guy versions of them. If anything, the parodies demonstrated the depth of cultural penetration the films had achieved. You cannot parody something effectively unless the audience already knows it well enough to recognize what is being exaggerated. Lucas apparently understood this. His willingness to engage with the process, to watch the screening, to negotiate specific elements rather than refusing the entire project, suggests a person who had thought carefully about the relationship between his work and the culture that had absorbed it. Liam Neeson's response to being mocked by Family Guy is one of the more charming stories in the show's history with celebrities, partly because of how he found out about it. The Family Guy joke about Neeson targets his accent. Neeson is from Northern Ireland and has a strong Irish accent that he has maintained throughout a career that has required him to play American characters in numerous major films. The show produced a Cutaway, mocking his inability to convincingly perform an American accent, with a version of Neeson struggling through what the show presents as a hopelessly unconvincing attempt at sounding like someone from the United States. Neeson did not find this joke himself. His sons showed it to him. This detail, the actor's children being the ones to bring the Family Guy parody of their father to his attention, is the kind of thing that gets lost in most accounts of celebrity reactions to mockery, but it is worth holding on to. Neeson's introduction to the show's version of him came through his own kids finding it funny enough to share with him. His reaction was not anger. He found it funny enough that when Seth MacFarlane later contacted him about appearing in the film A Million Ways to Die in the West, Neeson agreed to take the role of the film's villain. His one condition was that he be allowed to use his real Irish accent rather than attempting an American one, a direct and clearly intentional callback to the Family Guy joke about his accent. He turned the mockery into the terms of his professional agreement. The thing the show had mocked him for became the thing he insisted on keeping. Adrian Brody's response sits at the opposite end of the spectrum from Neeson's.
MacFarlane encountered Brody at a social event and mentioned to him that he was a fan of one of Brody's films. By MacFarlane's own account, the conversation was cordial enough on MacFarlane's end, but Brody was not receptive. MacFarlane did not go into extensive detail about what was said, but he acknowledged clearly that there were hard feelings on Brody's part related to how Family Guy had treated him. MacFarlane did not specify which joke had caused the offense, or which episode it had appeared in, but the hard feelings were real enough that he mentioned them publicly as an example of a reaction that had not gone smoothly. Brody is not alone in having a difficult reaction. He is simply one of the few whose response became publicly known because MacFarlane chose to discuss it. Jon Stewart, the longtime host of The Daily Show on Comedy Central, reportedly had a negative reaction to a specific Family Guy joke involving the 2007 to 2008 writers' strike. Both MacFarlane and Stewart were supporters of the strike, which shut down television production for months as writers sought better pay and improved working conditions. Stewart returned his show to air about a month before the strike officially ended, which generated criticism from some quarters of the entertainment world who felt he was undermining the collective action by going back to work early. Family Guy apparently made a joke about this. MacFarlane did not describe the specific joke in detail when he discussed Stewart's reaction publicly, but there has been significant speculation that it involved a cutaway of Peter growing a horse leg and kicking Brian for standing behind him, a visual gag with an implication about Stewart's behavior during the strike. MacFarlane acknowledged in discussing the situation that the joke may have crossed a line, but he said he stood by what it was trying to say. Stewart, by all accounts, was not pleased. What makes the Stewart situation particularly interesting in the context of this essay is that it involves two people who broadly share political and cultural values, and the conflict between them is not about ideology, but about behavior during a specific labor dispute. The mockery was not punching at someone the show considered an enemy. It was punching at someone the show considered a colleague who had done something the writers disagreed with. That is a different and more uncomfortable version of celebrity mockery than anything else in this section. Tom Cruise's non-response has already been covered in Section 4, but it belongs here too, as the most visible example of a celebrity choosing complete public silence over any form of engagement. MacFarlane sat on a television sofa directly next to the man he had spent years turning into a cartoon figure associated with stalking, religious pressure, step stools, and ankle bracelets on his ex-wife. The host of that television program raised Family Guy specifically. The cameras were running. The audience was watching, and Tom Cruise said nothing about any of it. The silence is the most interesting response in this entire section, precisely because it is the hardest to interpret. Every other celebrity whose reaction is documented in this essay said or did something that reveals at least something about how they processed being mocked. Woods participated. Lucas negotiated. Neeson turned it into a contractual condition. Brody had hard feelings. Stewart was upset. Each of these responses tells you something about the person behind the famous name. Cruise's silence tells you something too. It tells you that he calculated, probably correctly, that no available response was better for him than no response at all. Laughing would suggest he was comfortable with the material. Getting angry would create a conflict he could not win against a show with 20 million viewers and a writer's room full of people who would happily spend 3 more seasons on Tiny Tom Cruise if given a reason to escalate. Engaging in any way meant extending the conversation about Family Guy's version of him into a news cycle that currently belonged to Edge of Tomorrow and whatever else he was there promoting. So he said nothing. And the nothing became its own kind of answer. Ryan Reynolds chose the most interesting path of all, which was to show up voluntarily and do the joke himself. He guest starred in Stewie Goes for a Drive in Season 10. He voiced a version of himself that spends the episode being homoerotic toward Peter Griffin in increasingly specific ways. He performed all of it. He did not soften it. He did not renegotiate the material in the recording session to make his version of himself more sympathetic or more dignified. He did the joke the writers wrote, with the commitment the joke required, and let it air.
The result is that Reynolds comes out of his Family Guy appearance with something that almost no other celebrity target in this essay managed to achieve. He comes out of it looking like someone with a genuine sense of humor about himself. Not the performed, press tour version of self-deprecation that celebrities do when they are asked about embarrassing moments in interviews, but the real version, where you hand control of your own image to someone else entirely and trust that the worst they can do with it is something you can absorb. Dwayne Johnson, whose Family Guy appearance involved him simulating intercourse between Peter and Lois by smashing two dolls together during the episode Big Man on Hippocampus, belongs in the Reynolds category. He showed up, he did the bit, he did not appear to find it beneath him. He treated it as the kind of absurdist comedy that the show produces, and gave it what it needed to work. What all of these reactions, taken together, reveal is something about the specific nature of what Family Guy does when it destroys a celebrity ego. The destruction is real. The jokes land. The reputation takes whatever hit the show delivers. But the relationship between the show and its targets is not simply adversarial. It is something stranger and more complicated. A negotiation between a platform that can say anything and people whose public existence depends on controlling what gets said about them. The ones who fought back lost. The ones who ignored it left a silence that became its own story. The ones who participated discovered that joining the joke gave them something back that the joke would otherwise have taken from them entirely. That is not a lesson about Family Guy specifically. It is a lesson about what happens when comedy holds power over a famous person's image, and the famous person has to decide how to live with it. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.